So Max, we're getting a lot of questions about the role of lithium here. Bolivia claims to have about 70% of the world's lithium reserves. Just recently,
well, no, Bolivia doesn't claim that. Actually, experts say Bolivia, international experts who say that Bolivia has 50 to 70% of the world's lithium reserves. And of course, lithium is used for batteries and electronics in cars, so you can keep it.
So Evo recently canceled a contract with a German company after there were some protests. To what extent do you think that factors in here, Max, a desire to grab Bolivia's lithium reserves?
Well, you can't have Teslas without lithium. The Tesla Model S has more than 7,000 individual batteries, each of which requires lithium. The entire battery pack is 1,200 pounds, and 15 pounds of that 1,200 pounds is lithium. So there's a piece at Bloomberg. We're going to need more lithium to meet electric car needs. Basically, we need lithium for the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is going to be a boon for mining. And much of that lithium, as this is from September 2017, much of that lithium's in Bolivia. Bloomberg provides a map, and the map just centers straight in on Bolivia. So is it a factor here? It's a factor, but so is natural gas. I mean, Evo Morales has nationalized the natural gas supply of Bolivia. And if you remember what happened to his predecessors, and I think it's actually more of a factor. First, you had the water uprising against Goni Sanchez de Lozada, who is just a pure product of the Washington Consensus and the IMF imposed on Bolivia. And the first protests against him were because he tried to basically sell off the country's main water utility and privatize it and put it in the hands of Bechtel. Then he tries to take the country's natural gas because California was hungry for natural gas and ship it out through Chile in 2003, just completely selling out the country's assets. And of course, Bolivians and Chileans are historic enemies. Chile has taken Bolivia's sea access. So, he's run out. And as he's run out, the U.S. trained military and the security forces massacre over 70 people. There is evidence that was obtained by the Center for Constitutional Rights of Michael Ratner, that they actually had plans to kill thousands to suppress the rebellion, which wouldn't stop. Vice president at the time was Carlos Mesa, who's now the opposition's sort of handpicked candidate. And Mesa, 2 years later, was overthrown and chased out for basically assenting to the IMF's wishes and trying to sell off the country's natural gas. So this is the huge issue. This is the big issue. What does Luis Fernando Camacho, the face and voice of the coup, do? He is a lawyer and a businessman from a region of the country where the Camacho family basically runs a natural gas cartel. His father is involved in the natural gas industry. His cousins in the industry. His uncle, runs a facility. So what do they want? They want more profits. They want to stop nationalizing it and giving back the profits to the indigenous population, who they regard as a satanic mass. So that's really what, to me, this is about. And I think lithium's absolutely an issue. But I mean, I'll hand it over to Ben, and I want Ben to talk about something else, which is the audio tapes, which appear to be real, which outline all of the coup plotting and coordination with people in Washington, like Bob Menendez and Marco Rubio, Narco Rubio. And, I want you to address that. But first, what do you think about this lithium issue? And also, you've been kind of on Twitter, kind of drawing the connection between the Green New Deal and the mining, and you've been saying that it's going to be a boon for the mining industry, which might not mean that it's actually altogether environmentally beneficial. So I don't know if you can handle those three issues, but those are three things that I want to know more about.
Absolutely. So this is Ben here, and for those watching, I have up on the screen, it's in Spanish, but This is in the Spanish language media, there has been a series of articles published. It's of course curiously avoided the English language corporate media, but there's been a series of articles published looking at a series of 16 audio recordings that were leaked. And these audio recordings come from Bolivia before the election that Evo Morales that he won on October 20th. And what's interesting is that Evo knew this coup was coming. In fact, there is a very interesting interview published before the election, before October 20th. And in this interview, Evo Morales said, "I have proof that there is a coup coming, that if I win the election, they're going to overthrow me in a coup." And he said, "How do I know that? We have audio recordings that show that the opposition is conspiring with foreign countries, including with the US, including with Brazil, including with the European Union." And these audio recordings of opposition figures cite specifically Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Bob Menendez as supposedly, allegedly, as senators.
As well as Ivan Duque, the right-wing president of Colombia, his mentor, Alvaro Uribe. Bolsonaro is cited as someone who's on board. Of course, we saw Camacho, the coup leader, actually make pilgrimages to those countries in May to get them on board, and also plans to set government buildings on fire, to get pro-business unions out to carry out strikes, all straight out of the CIA destabilization playbook.
Yeah, and again, I need to stress this point that these audio recordings, I actually got access to these recordings. I found a link to them before the election took place. But the thing is, I couldn't confirm them. I didn't know if they were real, so I couldn't report on them. But again, Evo Morales said before the election, he said, "I have these audio recordings that prove that the opposition is planning a coup." And up on the screen here, for those watching, I have a part of our article that Max and I just published at the Grayzone. And you can see this photo here is Luis Fernando Camacho, who is the literal fascist who led the coup, this Christian, not evangelical, actually Catholic, this Christian extremist, fundamentalist who led the coup. And right next to him, to his left, is Ivan Duque, who is the far-right president of Colombia, very far-right, who has basically been trying to tear up the peace accord with the FARC. And then to the left of Ivan Duque is another former president of Colombia. And this was a meeting in May, well before the election. And then also another smoking gun we have that I found, and we were the first people to report on this at the Grayzone, is this tweet from August. This tweet is incredible. Let me explain this, because I know it's in Spanish here. This is Luis Fernando Camacho. This is the coup leader, the extremist. And he's saying that we are not going to stop until we have a real democracy. We will keep on going. And then he's saying, we have support. Thanks to God, there's hope. And he says, thanks Colombia, thanks Venezuela, thanks Brazil. Of course, when he says thanks Venezuela, he's not referring to the actual democratically elected government of Venezuela. He's referring to the coup leader. And as you can see here, this photo shows him with, to his left, the other guy, the old guy, is Gustavo Tarre. Tarre is the fake Venezuelan ambassador to the Organization of American States of the coup regime. And the photo behind him is Juan Guaido, who is the fake president of Venezuela, who 3/4 of the world does not recognize. The U.S. claims that he's the president of Venezuela. He controls nothing. He never won an election. He's not elected. And you can see that these photos are from August. So 2 months before the election, the coup leader was meeting not only with the Colombian far-right president, he was also meeting with the Venezuelan US-backed opposition, because of course they were all planning the coup together. And these audio recordings prove they have Bolivian opposition officials and military officials discussing in meticulous detail the plans. And what's so wild is that in this interview, Evo Morales said, "I know they're planning a coup against me if I win the election." And he didn't just say it. He said, the coup is going to be based in Santa Cruz, based in a civic organization, which is an obvious reference to the Pro-Santa Cruz Committee, the Comité Pro Santa Cruz, which is the Comité Cívico, which is the civic committee, which is the group led by the coup leaders. So Evo Morales and the intelligence services knew, it's clear that they knew that a coup was planned, and they knew by name who was going to carry it out. So, we're just beginning to scratch the surface of a very, very dirty operation here. And I think this, in many ways, echoes the famous CIA coup against Salvador Allende in 1973, the first 9/11. And these people claiming that the U.S. is not involved, just look at the White House statement. I mean, it's one thing that the White House, of course, recognizes the coup regime, but it's worse than that. I'm going to get at the statement here because Trump actually rubs it in. Trump specifically says this is a warning to the so-called illegitimate regimes in Nicaragua and Venezuela. So not only does Trump and the White House call this a supposed victory for democracy, at the same time, he's warning Venezuela, which is enduring multiple U.S. coup attempts throughout this year, and also Nicaragua, which last year suffered from a coup attempt that failed. So maybe, Max, you can jump in because we were in Nicaragua this summer, and you were in Nicaragua last year during the end of the failed coup attempt. And you can talk, and I'll get up the White House statement while we jump to Max here.
Well, the difference in Nicaragua is the same thing in Venezuela. Their police forces and military were reformed over the years, and especially the police by Tomas Borges. And the police have one of the best records in Central America of kind of community policing. They don't have the same violence that you see in the Northern Triangle. You don't have Mara Saltrucha. You don't have those same problems because of the awareness that the Sandinistas had first of preventing CIA penetration and also, keeping drug cartels out. Drug cartels have been used actually as a weapon of destabilization in Venezuela. So when you saw the Bachelet report by the curiously quiet Michelle Bachelet, the former president of Chile, who has nothing to say about the violence in her country, indicting Venezuela and accusing them of mass extermination by their FICE, sort of special police who are like, specially trained security forces. They're accused of thousands and thousands and thousands of killings. I think the number is inflated and exaggerated. Most of the allegations contained in the Bachelet report. By the way, she's the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner, so it's a UN report. They were based on innuendo, rumors, and distortions of half-truths by an opposition that is largely based now outside of Venezuela. But there were raging battles inside areas of Caracas and other cities between narco cartels and the special police, and it's to prevent Venezuela from turning into Colombia, and to prevent these groups from destabilizing the country, which have close links to Colombia. And Colombia functions as what? The Israel of South America. It's a U.S. anchor
to famously quote Hugo Chavez.
Inside the continent. I think there were many people who were killed, but this is, as many Venezuelans explained to me, something that was done with kind of national interest in mind to prevent areas from becoming ungovernable and controlled by criminal gangs. So you have a huge crime problem in Venezuela. Nicaragua, it's the least violent country in Central America. So again, Evo Morales was unable to carry out those kinds of reforms in the last 13 years. And you actually, you saw these pathetic attacks in some left-wing alternative media or left-wing media on Morales for not being, purely anti-capitalist enough. And that's because it's really difficult to come into power and then deal with a separatist region like Santa Cruz, where the landowners don't even want to pay taxes and are trying to secede. So what he was able to do is at least get them to participate in national life and held off a secessionist movement for this long. But then you had a military that was supplied down to their boots by the U.S. and whose leadership was completely cultivated by the School of the Americas and all of these military and police exchange programs.
And if I can jump in for a second,
Yeah.
you mentioned the so-called autonomy movement in Santa Cruz, which is the largest city in Bolivia and also the richest area. And I have up on the screen here, this is a part of our article. And again, for anyone who's interested, you could check out at the Grayzone. This is the article Max and I published, Bolivia coup led by Christian fascist paramilitary leader and millionaire with foreign support. But in this article, we looked through some of the WikiLeaks cables, and they showed that Carlos Mesa, who was the opposition presidential candidate, was regularly corresponding with the U.S. government. But in addition to that, the U.S. government for years was also supporting the Santa Cruz secessionist movement because the U.S. was trying to balkanize Bolivia because they recognized that if the right wing can't win an election, then they can at least try to create an autonomous region where the right wing rules and can be allied with the U.S. Of course, I mean, something we didn't even stress in this, which we should have earlier, is that, not only is Evo Morales a leftist, not only did he, nationalize the natural resources like the gas and part of the lithium, but also Evo Morales was a major voice of anti-imperialism. And I invite anyone watching, there are incredible clips. In fact, I'll get some of the clips when other people are talking.
One clip to bring up is that the UN, after the Syrian government was accused of chemical attack or sarin gas attack. This might have been 2018 or 2017, which of course triggered U.S. airstrikes on Syria across the red line. And as a former Obama advisor told Harper's, a red line is a recipe for a false flag. It was the Bolivian UN delegation that invoked the WMD pretext for the Iraq war and just really threw it back in the face of the U.S. And defended Syria's sovereignty at the UN. That is the kind of thing that infuriates the United States, along with kicking the DEA out, something that Evo Morales absolutely had to do because the DEA was the ultimate U.S. cat's paw in Latin America.